Okay, so for those of you guys who just joined us, right, a very warm welcome. If you guys have any questions in the chat, right, do put them on. I mean, if you have any setups that you want us to take a look at, right, do put them under the chat. Okay, so we'll just kickstart today's session, right? So just a quick introduction of myself. I'm Lee Sing. If you guys are watching a recording of this and you have any questions, you can also feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. So just a quick disclaimer before getting the session started. The information presented here is not to be treated as investment advice. It's for educational purposes only. So this is the agenda that we will be covering for today, right? First, we'll take a look at the key economic events, and following which we will be taking a look at our trade setups. So for today, I want to take a look at mainly dollar index as well as Kiwi dollar and gold, right? So if you guys have other setups, do put them under the chat. And of course, we'll open the door to Q&A. Okay, so let's take a look at our setups, right? So before we hop on to the setups, let's take a look at our economic calendar. So for economic calendar, usually I'll just use either Vantage Markets, right? You can go to vantagemarkets.com under education and tools, economic calendar. Right, so this would be one avenue, right? The other would be using Forex Factory. So in this case, you can see that this would be the upcoming one that we have for today, right? Mainly revolve around dollar, right? So dollar and CAD data. So we will have dollars retail sales data up, as well as Canada's manufacturing sales. Okay, so these are the key events coming up for today. So let's take a look at our setups. Right, so the first one I want to take a look at is on dollar index, right? So again, we always want to start from the higher time frame for our analysis, right? So let's say going from the monthly time frame. Let me just remove all this, right? So you can see that on the monthly time frame. So on the monthly time frame where we are, I want to focus on this portion of the chart, right? Because the most recent price development here. So anywhere between last year to where we stand now. So you can see that currently prices are sitting on resistance, turn support level, right? This area here. So we saw this strong push up for price pullback. So we saw this strong push up here and this retracement, right? So what we want to do is that having identified this zone, right, we're trying to find if there are any retracement levels that line up here. So what we can do with this, right, it's first to take the retracement, right? So this is the move up, this is the impulsive move, and we have that pullback. So this is the lowest point, and this is the highest point. So when we do this, right, we're trying to find if there are any retracement levels that line up with the zone. So when you take a retracement of this from low to high, you can see the 38 or the 50% rather, right? So the 50%, this is broken. So this is no longer valid, right? So price came in, you can see it tapping the 50% before it broke right through. So the next level that would be valid, the nearest level is 61.8, which is lying slightly lower, right? In line with this resistance and support level here. So this is the picture on the monthly. If you go on to the weekly time frame where we are currently on the weekly, we can see that price came in. It failed to break above this high. You can see this area here. So we are seeing subsequent we're seeing consecutive lower lows and lower highs here, right? So price came in, formed new lows, broke below, and you can see that with the last move up, right, price barely broke more. It just swept above this high before it continues to the downside. So right now, if we're on the weekly structure, you can see that it's still bearish, right? So prices are still pushing lower here. Right? We have a sweep above the high, but price did not break above it before it continues to the downside. So this is the picture on the weekly. We see that prices are also sitting on some kind of descending trend line, right? It's respecting this descending trend line with multiple touches here. So prices are still in a downtrend on the weekly. If you go on to the daily time frame, you can see that even with the most recent movements as well, right? If you take a look at where we are in terms of the daily structure, again, price came in, formed a new low, broke below, continue to the downside. So you can see that even if I were to put it in close, prices are again forming successive lower lows and lower highs, right? So on the daily first is still bearish. Okay, so once we have identified this, the next thing that we want to do is to try and find if there are any resistance areas that we would like to watch, right? So for resistance zones, right, this is one area. So you can see this zone here. And the reason why I highlighted this zone is because of how price interacted with this area, right? You can see price came in, we saw that sharp rejection, broke above it, set on this zone again before it continued higher. And even when price comes into this area, you can see that there's some reaction here before it broke through, and then once again coming to test it as a resistance here. So this is the resistance area for me, right? So again, once we've identified the resistance zone on the daily time frame, so our direction on the across all time frames, you can see that it's still bearish, right, on dollar index. So what we want to do next is that we try and find if there are any retracements on the daily that line up with the zone that we've highlighted. Right, so for this, you can see that this is the move down. So if we're expecting any pullback, right, then we will have to take the retracement starting from that highest point to the lowest point here. Okay, so when we do this, let's see what it gives us. So highest point, lowest point. So you can see the 23.6 retracement, right? I'll put this in a different color, right? So this is in blue. So 23.6 retracement taken here that lines up with this resistance area that we found. And the reason why this is valid, right? So if you compare the previous example with what we have with this retracement, the reason why this is valid is because our last point, it's the lowest point here. And to the right of this point, right, price did not break through it. So if we take a look at the previous example where we saw the 50% not being valid, the reason for that is because 50% itself, right, was broken by this low. So price came into this, tested the first time, and then following which it broke right through. So which is why it makes that level invalid. So this is one, right? So this is one area here on the daily. So let's go on to the 4 hours time frame, right? So you can see that right now, even if you're on the daily, the 4 hours, even on the 4 hours, right, you're seeing again successive lower lows and lower highs being formed on the 4 hours, right? We have once again this, right? So not so much of a descending channel because price broke below this channel, but the idea is that you can see again, right, successive lower lows and lower highs being formed on the 4 hours, right? Potential descending trend line here as well, right? So it all points to the same area that we have here. Okay, so on the 4 hours, you can also do something else, right, to identify this, right? So again, this is the impulsive move, right? So if you're taking it on the 4 hours, ideally you want to take it from a move that is smooth instead of having like a high here, right? So if I'm taking the retracement from here, this is not wrong, right? Because as long as there is a high, there is a low, and to the right of this low, it's still holding, right? So price did not break below the right of this low, then this retracement is still valid. But for best practice sake, right, it's better that we try and use the retracement from the most direct move. So in this case, right, this is the most direct move and the pullback. So when we use a retracement on this move alone, you can see this move down, right? We're basically trying to identify the highest point and the lowest point. So if price, if price pulls back from here, right, you can see that when it pulls back from here, essentially we're trying to find if there are any retracement levels that line up with the zone. Okay, so let's use the retracement tool from the highest point to the lowest point. Right, so there's, if you notice one thing about Fibonacci retracement levels is that at almost every interval, you will be able to see a level, right? So don't worry too much of which level to use, but rather just understand that when you're trying to find if there are any levels that line up with the zone, right? Ideally, we try and find a level that coincides with the area, okay? Because you can see again, right, even if I were to just include all these levels, you can see that the 23.6, 38.2, 50, all of these levels just based on retracement, right? They are valid levels because price have yet to test and break through them. But the level that I'm looking at in this case, right, given that I've identified this zone, then in this case, this, in terms of the retracement, this is the level that I would like to watch. Okay, so this is the retracement. So in this example, you can see that the 78.6 retracement or 76.4, right? So you can use them interchangeably. But for me, I just use 78.6 retracement, right? So this retracement level lines up with this zone. If you have the 61.8, right, it actually coincides with the start of the higher time frame zone, which is the daily, right, this daily area here. So for me, dollar index is still bearish, right? Given the recent structure that we have, we could see more downside, right? So when price comes into, again, if price comes into a demand area, right, or support level, you can see that right now we have this low that we saw previously, and prices are currently testing this area. Right. So again, if price comes into this zone and we're seeing a reversal or a respect of this higher time frames demand, what needs to happen first is that price needs to break above the last high, right? This structure, because this is the first sign that we are seeing a bullish order flow and there's this change in market structure. And this is then in line with the higher time frame, right? Given the prices are sitting on a potential monthly demand area. So, okay, so this is the picture on dollar index. Right, let's take a look at another setup. And if you guys have any chat requests as well, do put them under the chat. Okay, so another setup that we have. Okay, so another setup that we have, right, would be on Kiwi dollar. So you can see that for Kiwi dollar, right, yesterday we had the strong push up here, right? In fact, on all dollar pairs, as dollar continues to weaken, you can see that Euro dollar, Kiwi dollar, Aussie dollar, gold, right? They all stand to benefit from this dollar's weakness. Okay, so let's take a look at the higher time frame again. So on the higher time frame, you can see that on the monthly picture here, right, prices are sitting on a resistance area. You can see this area here. Right, so again, why would I identify this area? If you just take a look at how price interacted. So price came into this region, tested this area once, we saw that reaction the second time, broke through this level, and we tested as a resistance. And then once again, the rejection here. So this is the picture on the monthly, right? So again, you can identify the highest and lowest point. And once you've identified this, you can try and find the retracement level for this zone. So on the highest and lowest point here, you can see the 50% retracement. So 50% retracement lines up with this zone. Area here. So that's one, right? So that's the picture on the monthly. If you're on the weekly, right, nothing much changed, but you can see again on the weekly, it just shows a clearer picture of this region, how price interacted with the zone. Right? And what we have currently on the weekly is that you can see that prices are coming into a potential resistance area here. Right? That's one. It's currently testing this region. We also have an ascending trend line that prices are currently respecting. So what this suggests is that if price breaks through it, breaks and close above this area, right, we could be seeing more upside. So, okay. So just something to keep in mind, right? And we saw that tests of the region once. Okay. So this is the picture on the weekly, right? Let's take a look at the daily. So on the daily, right, you can see that this is currently what's happening on the daily, right? So price came into this zone. I'll probably have to adjust the trend line slightly on daily so that the trend line just cuts the tip, but not the body of the candles. Okay, so this is the picture that we have on the daily. We can see that prices consolidated multiple times here. But what's interesting is that beyond this, right, you can see if you take a look at the left of the chart, right, you can see that there is a demand area here. So I explained previously why the reason why I take a look at these candles, right, that held within the wick of the previous candles as demand region. Because if you have to take a look at, let's say, this candle here. Right, so let me just highlight this specific candle. Let's put it in a different color, right? Let's just put this in blue. And so notice this area, this region. Right, so even though on the higher time frame, it might seem like it's just one candle. If you take a look at it, let's see if you go down to the 1 hour time frame, right? If you take a look at it on the 1 hour, you can see that this candle that held within the wick, right? So the wick is actually represented by the high of this area here. And this candle, which is bearish on the daily, right? You can see that this is actually just consolidation on the lower time frame before price broke above the high, which is why for me, right, when we have a candle on the higher time frame holding below the wick of the previous candle, this is when it shows that there's consolidation across the lower time frame, right? And these areas can serve as support zones, right? So if you were to go back to the daily, you can see that price came in, right? So this is the consolidation. So if I have to go back to the daily here, you can see this region, right? So again, this is the wick. We have this wick, and then price consolidated before it broke right through this candle here. And so this, once there is a break in structure, price broke above it, then this candle itself serves as a demand, right? So you can see that this is a demand area. And then once again, price came in, tapped into the zone, right? Broke through, it once again broke structure, broke above the last high here. And then this candle at the end of it serves as a demand again, right? You can see price came in, right? So once there is a break in structure here, so I'll just label this as BOS, right? So there's a break in structure, price came in to the extreme of this candle. So once price breaks above it, you can see that price, the last candle itself that caused that break in structure, which in this case would be this candle over here on the daily, right? Price broke through it. This candle then serves as a new demand, and price came into this zone again, continue to the upside. And then once again, you see that's the same pattern repeating here, right? So price came into this region. The last candle that broke structure is this candle here, right? Because this is the last high, and this is the last candle that broke the previous structure. So once again, when there is a break in structure, this candle serves as a demand. Price came into this region, right? So this is the last candle that we have over here, this zone, right? But this doesn't serve as a demand because there is no structure, right? If you take a look at structures here, this is the last high, right? Price did not break structure, so you can see that once that happens, this candle itself, which is the demand, right? They did not break structure, price swept it, so it swept below the low of this candle, back into the demand area again, right? And then before it continued higher. Okay, so this is the picture on Kiwi dollar, right? And then price continues to the upside. You can see again, if I have to follow through, it's the same example, right? This demand area here, we have demand, right? So demand, price came in the first time, which is here. The first time it actually came into this demand area was here, right? Price came in, tapped it, broke above this high, and then you can see that demand chain following through as well. So if I were to just narrow it down, you can see that there is this low. Price came in, tapped into this region, right? We saw that break in structure happening here. You can see price broke above the high, and then once that happens, the last candle becomes a demand area, which is this candle. And because this candle, you can see this candle over here, still held within the last high. Okay, and then so on and so forth until the last demand area break. You can see that when there is no change and this is the last high, right? There isn't a break in structure. Price did not break and close above this last area over here, this zone. So what this shows is that this demand area, this zone, right, that we have, this last candle, this is not a valid zone, right? Price reacted, but it did not break above the high, and you can see following that price just broke lower, and this is the sign that on the higher time frame, right? At least on the daily, right, it's bearish. Okay, so price came into this zone, and right now we're seeing a pullback into the trend line over here, right? And what we have currently on the daily time frame is that we can see that prices are sitting on an ascending trend line. So following this move, right, when price did not break above, so following the sweep of this high, you can see that price continues trending much lower, pulling back into the trend line. And then once again, right, this trend line, if we take a look at what we have on the left, you can see that this demand area, right, this was the demand area that we held. So if I extend it across, you can see that this is the first demand region, and price came in previously into this demand zone, right, with this candle, broke above. So this demand area is still valid, right? So still valid because we had the break of structure above previously, and even then, right, as long as price holds above it, this demand zone is valid. So then again, you see the same chain coming across, right? So price came in, the first one that broke structure, it's this candle here. You can see that this is the last candle, price swept above this high. So the last candle that broke structure is this area. Price came in once again. You can see it tapped into the demand region, broke above the high again over here. Right, so it broke above. So this is the candle that broke structure, and you can see that demand, follow through all the way here. So once again, right, continuing this move up, price came in, it's swept below the low of the previous move, right? So all of these candles, right, you can, if you just extend these areas, you can see that all of these areas, our price came into the extreme of this zone, tested this area. Once it fails to break structure, right, it breaks below, come into the lower demand area that we have. So that's the picture on the daily, right? But what we have right now on the daily is that prices are currently sitting on an ascending trend line. It came into the zone, right? We're not seeing the change in structure, right? The first sign of that change in structure comes in here. So you can see that this is the last area. If I were to put it in close, you can also see this zone, right? So this is the last high. This is the last high, right? The one that I've marked out in blue. So if price comes into this area, respected the ascending trend line, it also broke above the high, then the last candle that held as a demand, it's basically this candle on the daily. Right, so I'll label this on the daily. So this is the candle that we have. So then we want to go on to the 4 hours time frame. So the idea is that if price pulls back into this demand area here, right, I'm just waiting for that change in structure before price continues to the upside. Okay, so that's the picture on the daily, the 4 hours, right? If you take a look at the 4 hours, another thing that we want to ask ourselves is we try and identify again if there are any support resistance areas, right? And we can also use the same concept that we did earlier on the daily, the same supply demand areas that we saw earlier on the daily, right? We'll apply the same concept onto the 4 hours. But on the 4 hours, the main difference is that right now I want to focus on just this portion of the chart because I've narrowed it down on the daily time frame. Right? I've narrowed the daily time frame down to this demand area here. So this is the one that I want to focus on in trying to find entries on the lower time frame. So before that, right, before trying to find the entries, right, we also need to ensure that we know what's our profit target. So in this example, you can see that the most immediate profit target, the clearest level that we have, right, will be this area here. I'll put this in a different color, right? Let's just say in blue. So you can see that this region, right, price tested as both support and resistance, and then the rejection here again, right? So if price comes into this daily area, right, we could target this blue zone as the resistance. So that's one, right? And once we have identified this, again, on the daily, right, we try and find if there are any retracement levels that line up with this blue zone. So what we want to do, identify the impulse, right? So this is the move down. This is the highest point. This is the lowest point. So you try and find the resistance area here. So the highest point, lowest point. And I'm trying to find if there are any levels that line up with the blue zone. So in this example, you can see the 61.8 lines up very nicely. In fact, we saw a rejection here once. We saw a rejection of this level once. Right, so this is the picture, or rather the target for me on the daily time frame. Right, so just an area that I should be careful of, right? So if you're holding on to any long positions, right, when price comes into this zone, right, it might not stop and reverse here, but the idea is that price could continue much higher, but we want to ensure that we are doing proper trade management in terms of partials, or even taking, or even trailing the stop losses. Okay, so on the 4 hours time frame, right? So now we zoom down to the 4 hours, having identified the daily zone. So on the 4 hours time frame, what we have here, it's the most current, the most recent area, right, which is the daily picture. On the 4 hours, right, again, we're trying to find support resistance areas, right? So you want to ask yourself, what is the last candle that broke structure? So you can see that this is the high. We have, if I were to put it in close, you can see subsequent lower lows and lower highs, right? So we have subsequent lower lows and lower highs, and then price broke above this high. So this is the last structure on the 4 hours, right? This area here. So I'll put this in a different color. Let's just say this in pink. Right, so this is the 4 hours, right? So when price broke and closed above the 4 hours, you can see that the last candle that held within it, it's actually this candle here. So I'll put this in a different color, right? Let's just say H4. Okay, so this is the picture on the 4 hours, right? So you can see this candle here, it broke above the last high. And then another thing that you want to ask yourself, by having identified this, it's again, are there any levels that line up with this zone? Right now we're seeing a pullback in price, right? And if price continues to trend lower, if you're on the lower time frame, right? So focus on this portion of the chart, right? So if we do see a pullback into the demand area, you can see that, let's say if I go to the 15 minutes, right? So you can see the 15 minutes, right? You'll start forming lower lows and lower highs. Right now, it's still forming higher lows, no higher highs, right? You're seeing this equal highs being formed, and then that confirmation of a further move down comes in when price breaks below this low. Right, so if you're on the 15 minutes, right, and price starts forming, it breaks below this low, pulls back and start forming lower lows and lower highs, right, then driving into this demand area here. How do we know whether this demand area is going to be respected, right? That happens when the change in structure comes in on the lower time frame. Okay, so this is the picture currently on the 15 minutes, but I'm going back to the 4 hours, right, because that's where we left off. So on the 4 hours, you can see that prices are coming into a potential resistance area here. But again, right, for any kind of confirmation, right? So again, if you have to use or apply the same logic, right, you can see this area. So we have a low. Right, so we have a low. You can see this is the wicks of the candle. You can see this is the wicks, right? So this is the wicks of the candle. Price came in and then it broke through the wick. So the last candle that held within the wick is the supply region, which is this candle here. Okay, so I hope that this is clear. And so just looking at the interaction between both zones. Right, so there is demand and then price held, tested it, broke through it, and right now it's just supply. But if you're on the 15 minutes, you can see that that bearish move hasn't happened yet, because if you want confirmation on the 15 minutes, price has to break through this low in order for more downside, right? So this is the M15. You can call this the M15 downside confirmation. Okay, so let's go back to the 4 hours, right? So right now we could see a deeper pullback into this demand region here, right? So having identified this, right, if we do see a deeper pullback into this demand region, what you're trying to find is, again, right, this is the move up and this is that pullback. So the lowest point and highest point, we're trying to find if there are any retracement levels lining up here. So lowest point, highest point. So you can see the 78.6 retracement, right? That lines up with the H4 zone that we've identified. We could see a deeper pullback into this area, right? So again, I'm trying to wait for opportunities to play a move up, right? So depending on how market structure is, if we do see that downside confirmation, we could play a short-term move to this area, right? But on the higher time frame, if you're on the daily, you can see that it's still sitting on the support region. So for me, on the daily, it's still more bullish. Okay, so if we could do see a push up, again, this is the first resistance area, and of course, the next resistance area to target, which is this move up here. So this is the picture on Kiwi dollar, right? Let's take a look at gold. And if you guys have any chart requests as well, right, do put them under the tab. Okay, so on gold, right, gold has been pushing up very strongly. You can see the previous region, right? So previous call on gold. In this support region, price continued higher. You have an ascending channel that's being formed, and right now gold is at the resistance of this ascending channel, right? So if you draw this ascending channel, right? But let's start from the higher time frame again. So on the higher time frame first, you can see that if I to zoom in, price comes into a potential resistance area here, right? Price came in, you see it tested this zone with sharp wicks and reversal multiple times in this area. So that's the picture on the weekly, right? Not too different, coming to a resistance area. If you're on the daily time frame, we can see that it's still showing bullish structure, right? And how we know it's bullish, right? It's higher highs and higher lows being formed. If you put it in close, you can see this as well, right? Just mark out this reversal points, right? Highest or the peak and troughs, right? So in this case, you can see that it's still forming higher lows and higher highs. Okay. We also do have to keep in mind that on the 4 hours, it is holding in an ascending channel. And right now, prices are testing the resistance of the ascending channel. So I'll remove all of this because they're no longer valid, right? So this played out nicely. So, right. So in this case, prices are currently sitting on an ascending channel, right? One thing that we also did with this move is that we try and find, right? So if you attend the Fibonacci series, right, you'll understand that when we take a look at retracements, right, retracements are always combined with market structure. If prices starts forming higher lows and higher highs in this case, right, then we're trying to find areas or opportunities to buy from. And when we talk about profit targets, right, there are 3 profit targets that we covered in earlier series. The 100%, which is basically the high, the last high that we have, which is the high that we marked out previously, this high. That's the first target. Second target, -27, which you are seeing over here. And this -27 happened to coincide with the resistance, channel's resistance, right? That's one. And the last one, what would be the -61.8, right? So this, it's slightly higher. So that's the picture on the 4 hours, right? For me, the demand zone is still the same, right? Of course, the levels are no longer valid now because price moved, right? And we need to ensure that the retracement levels that were drawn, the highest point should not be violated. So in this case, this is not valid because of the most recent price. And so recent price developments broke this high, which is why the retracement is no longer valid. So let's delete all of this. Right, so where we are currently now, you can see that still the same support zone, right? This doesn't change. This area here, right? And again, right, the why we identified this zone is because of price, how price interacted with this area. But what we want to do with this, right, having identified the zone, right now, if we are trying to find retracement levels, right, I would say that this is the most impulsive move and any pullback. So this is the lowest point, and this is the highest point, right? So which kind of make it pointless if we're trying to draw the retracement level because this is just 100%. So if we draw this, you can see that this basically stands at 100%. Right, because it's the lowest point. So yeah, so no retracement level there. Right, and then what we want to do next is again extension level, so zigzag patterns, right? So this is the zigzag pattern. So trying to find if there are any extension levels that line up with the support zone. So 0.1, 0.2, and 0.3. Right, so when you open up this extension levels, you can see the 1.272 level lining up with this zone. Right, so there's one. Let's remove this. Right, so this is one. So again, right, if price comes into a potential resistance area first, we would first see we will first see the consolidation. Right, so price would consolidate, starts forming on the lower time frame, bearish structure, and that would then signal a deeper pullback, right, on your 4 hours. Right, so if you go into the 1 hour time frame, you can see on the 1 hour right now, right, prices are forming some kind of structure, coming to a demand region here. Right, so prior to this move up, prices are still in a bullish structure. You can see higher lows, higher highs. Price came in, swept below this move. So again, if I have to just expand this, right? So let's try and track demand supply areas, right? So we have a break of this structure here. Price broke above the structure, right? So this would then be the last candle that held within. Right? So you can see in this case, when price breaks above structure, so we wouldn't know for sure whether the demand area is going to hold, right? But it's just a probability, right? Because there's always a chance that price could go against, or in this example, you can see that it broke right through it. So these are what we call sweeps, right? So liquidity sweeps. When price breaks above this area and it sweeps below this low, then causing another change in structure, right? So this is the liquidity sweep. Right, so if price breaks below and it sweeps below, you can see that the candle that sweeps it, which is basically this candle here, right? This candle, like following this candle, you can see that price action, right, broke structure here, right? Then this candle will serve as the demand. Okay, so of course we wouldn't be able to anticipate this, right? At times where price could just whip right through it. So if we're coming into these areas on the lower time frame, we try and find confirmation of reversals, right? So you can see that when price comes into this area currently on the 1 hour time frame, right? When we're not seeing any kind of low being formed, right? This is one, right? Prices are currently holding below this region. And so we need to wait for more consolidation and clearer structure to be formed first before we can anticipate a deeper pullback. Okay, so currently you can see it's sitting on this low. Right? If you're on the 15 minutes time frame, you can see that price tested this region here. Right? We're seeing a low that's being formed. Price broke above it, form a new low, did not break above the high. You can see that price did not break above this high over here. This is the last high that we saw. Right? And then prices are just testing this area here. So if I'm on a 15 minutes time frame and I'm seeing this, right? For me, this is the last leg on the 15 minutes. Right, this is the push down. So ideally, right, when price tested this region, right, and we have this move down, we once again want to try and find if there are any resistance zones, right? So if you focus on this portion of the chart, right, and also take a look at the supply areas, right, we have this zone, right, price coming into the extreme of this move on the 15 minutes. I'll just put this in a different color, right? Let's just say yellow on the 15 minutes. Right, so if price comes into the zone, right, and we have this on 15 minutes, you can see that this started to follow through, right? So we have mitigation to this yellow area here, and then price broke below structure, right? And then came back into the extreme of the zone. You can see this area, right? And then once again, right? So this area, it's one area that has not been tested. No, it has been tested, right? So if you take a look at this low stands at 2044.35, and this is 0.43, right? So price actually came to test this region, right? So this supply area here, and this supply chain continues, right? So we have this area, and then price broke structure. So this is the last supply region for us to consider, right? So if you do see a pullback, right, this is one area on the 15 minutes that I will watch. So once again, right, having identified that, right, you want to see if there are any retracement levels lining up here. So this is the move down and the pullback, right? So taking a retracement from the high to low, let's try and find if there are any levels that line up there. So I'll take a retracement of this one from high to low. So you see the 61.8 retracement here, right, in line with this zone. So if we do see a pullback into this area, right, we could be seeing a deeper move down from here, right, a short-term move, of course, along the way, if you're on the 1 hour. Right, so right now, I'm on the 15 minutes time frame, which suggests this, right? If you want to be more conservative, you want to wait for the 1 hour to show structure, right? Then we need to wait for the 1 hour low to form. You can see currently it's just consolidating, right? There's no structure here. So ideally, when we do see a reversal, you can see this pattern starts forming. Okay, so this is the picture from me on Go, right? Right now, I'll just wait for it a bit more to let it develop, right? On the 15 minutes, this is an area I want to watch. Yeah, right? So let's see how it goes, right? Of course, if price comes into this zone and it starts showing reversal on your lower time frame, that's when there's confirmation that it's indeed respecting this 15 minutes as a resistance. If not, price could just go right through. Okay, so this is the picture from me on Go, right? And if you guys have any other questions, right, do put them under the chat. If not, right, that's what we have for today. Okay, so just give it about maybe 1 more minute, right? And if you guys have any, if you want to sign up for the future webinars, right, just go to vantagemarkets.com/webinars, and you should be able to see the different sessions as well as the schedules and topics there. If you have any questions on the account, right, do email to support@vantagemarkets.com. Okay, so with that, we have come to the end of the session, right? Thanks everyone for staying with us to the end, right? Have a great weekend. Trade safe, stay safe, and we will catch you guys again next week.